Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Dev Diary. For the last few months, we've been focusing on not just remaking an old project from a few years ago, but deviating from the original to make a different, more full experience. It's gone through a couple of iterations, the latest being more of an arcade-like action/fishing experience. But a lot has happened since the last time we worked on this project, and things are about to change. Again. But first, if you enjoyed today's video, remember to leave a like and subscribe if you're new to the channel. Also remember to turn on notifications so you don't miss future videos. So it's story time. We took the last couple months off from our main projects, this one included, and in that time we messed around with a lot of different smaller ideas, a lot of which ended the same way, trying to figure out what's next. Well, after a lot of thought, it became pretty apparent that there was some overlap between projects and their potential. And as I'm sure you've guessed by now, the end result was to merge them with our remake project. And so over the course of the next few sessions, the goal will be to implement those ideas and, hopefully, make them synergize with one another. Today we're starting with a major change that's unfortunately not going to be the most interesting visually, but was absolutely necessary before getting into anything else. Now, one of the smaller projects we explored was a pseudo 3D car combat game inspired by the game Heavy Bullets. It was an old idea that never really grew beyond the basics, so instead of trying to build a game around the concept, it's being added to our remake. This mostly means we've now added physics to our game, which now power both the player and enemies. This required gutting all of the original movement code and basically plugging in a version of the code from the car combat game. Some tweaks still need to be done, but the transfer was successful, though again it may be hard to even tell that anything's changed. But movement was just one of the many changes that had to be made. The second large change was that both the player and enemies use the same code for their behaviors. So moving, shooting, and fishing all use the same code, which itself is driven by our third largest change, stats. Now the player and enemies are capable of having completely customizable stats that determine how they function in-game. Everything from movement speed, turn speeds, fishing bobs, and most importantly, artillery are now handled via stats stored in personal arrays. These will obviously be upgradable for the player and also allow us to easily develop different types of enemies based purely off of stats. So we can have scouts, tanks, and so on. This stat system also allows us to implement newer and better ways to handle weapons, which brings us to yet another major change. First, back during our Squirts remake series, I posed the question of whether adding customizable guns to the game would have been an interesting direction to take. Well, we're exploring that potential here. Our new stats array includes values for fire rate, projectile amounts, ammo type, and just about everything else we need to create weapons. So much like creating enemy unit types, we can also create weapon types like shotguns or SMGs if we wanted. But the beauty is also the potential for unique customizations like auto RPGs that fire 3 rockets per shot. And what's even better is the system allows us to add even more features if needed. But this addition is unfortunately bittersweet, because this custom weapons concept was going to be the driving force behind the agoraphobic tower defense game that we've also been working on. The idea in that game was to take different parts, slap them on a turret, and that would determine how that turret would function. And we're going to be doing something very similar with this setup. Instead, we'll be affecting different parts of a ship's cannon. I will go more into detail once the system is actually up and running, but for now, custom weapons is the gist of this addition. And that was all I was able to get to this session. Again, the main focus was to get the base code updated to work with all the new stuff coming in the future, and trust me, there's a lot more features to come. So while nothing on the surface looks like it changed, trust me when I say that at least half the original code was gutted and rewritten to make this possible. So with the base in place, we can now start adding new fun content like the customizable weapons, assuming all goes according to plan. Fingers crossed. So, what do you think of these changes? Are you excited for the new change in direction, or do you prefer where we were going previously? I'd love to hear any and all thoughts, so leave them in the comments. Also, if you would like to play some previous games featured on the channel or get early access to the weekly videos, subscribe to my Patreon. With that said, brings us to the end of today's Dev Diary, so thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.